TCU has added a new coach to their defensive staff and their new defensive coordinator, Andy Avalos. We'll talk about that and a visitor coming in this weekend from the transfer portal as the Frogs continue to try to add to their secondary. That's all coming up next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We are free and available wherever it is you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us wherever it is you listen to podcasts in its audio form, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, etc. We're all there. You can give me ratings and reviews as well. TCU Hoops tonight. The men play Oklahoma at home at 8 o'clock. Women take on Texas. 7 p.m. tip for that one on the road. Going to be a tough game without Sedona Prince in the lineup. She broke her finger against Baylor last week. Men have a pretty important game. We'll get to that later on in the show. But I want to start with some football news. The Frogs have added their coaching staff. Now, this role for this specific coach has not been specified yet. But last night, according to Football Scoop, and the writer on this piece was John Bryce, he said Ken Wilson's exit from college football isn't set to last too long. Wilson, who most recently was the head coach of the Nevada Wolfpack, is joining the TCU football staff with Sonny Dykes. Sources told Football Scope Tuesday night. He was Nevada's head coach through the 2022 and 2023 seasons and served with the Wolfpack across multiple stints for more than 2 decades. He's also coached in the Pac-12 at Oregon and Washington State. So his role has not been specified. Now, I did see some people speculating online today. He spent a lot of time in his career coaching linebackers. He was a linebackers coach at Nevada, among a lot of other things. And then he spent time at Washington State for 6 years as a linebackers coach there. He was with Andy Avalos at Oregon. So I think that's the most important part of this hire. He is very familiar with Andy's system, and he coached linebackers while he was there at Oregon. They won that Pac-12 championship in 2020. He was the co-defensive coordinator in 2021, so he got up to the title. But the position that he coached there was linebackers, and that's technically open right now because Joe Gillespie had that role along with being the defense coordinator during his time at TCU. Now he's gone. Now, one fascinating thing about this transition, and I understand why Sydney did it. I like it from a continuity standpoint, and I think these guys are good recruiters. At the same time, I do find it interesting that allow might not be the right word. I mean, they came to an agreement about this. Avalos wouldn't have taken the job if it wasn't the case, but they kept the old staff together, essentially. I mean, Jamarcus McFarland still coaching defensive linebackers, your defensive lineman, your safeties coach is still Paul Gonzalez, Carlton Buckles is coaching your corners, which I think that's been really helpful in maintaining personnel. Like, you haven't seen really a lot of opt-outs or guys hitting the transfer portal since Avalos came on board. You didn't lose a ton of guys from your 2024 class. You did lose LaDainian Fields, high school corner, who ended up at Oklahoma State, and that was disappointing. But there wasn't a mass exodus that you might expect with a coaching change, especially when you make a coaching change with 10 days until early signing day. They were able to keep things intact. I think in large part that was because of the staff being together, sans Joe Gillespie. The thing is now, though, and I mean, coaches they have plenty of time to get up to speed on this, but you're talking about a coaching staff that is going to be learning along with the players. And they went through the same experience a couple of years ago when Gary Patterson left. Of course, they added Carlton Buckles to the staff and Jamarcus McFarland too. I guess Paul Gonzalez has been through this experience personally. But as a coach, you're learning a new system. And you're learning, okay, what responsibilities does my position group have? What kind of fundamentals and philosophies do I need to be teaching my guys? When we're talking about studying film, what their job is going to be in this new defense, et cetera. So you would think Ken Wilson can come in here and bridge the gap. Now, it didn't say he was going to coach linebackers. Maybe he will. I think there's also a possibility that he could just be an analyst, an extra set of eyes, maybe someone who in an off-the-field role can be really helpful. If he's an analyst, you would think he'd have less interaction with the players on a daily basis, probably a lot of interaction with them in the offseason and even during the week. But during the game, he's not going to be down there on the field talking with the guys. But I think it could be a valuable role, someone that Andy could bounce ideas off of, that understands the system, could probably help install some things. And he might end up being an on-the-field coach. We don't know. I'm just not sure yet whether that's something that Avalos is going to do himself or if he's going to enlist Ken Wilson to take that over for him. But this is a really experienced guy. I mean, the head coaching record at Nevada was 4-20, but I don't really think that matters too much. It didn't work out as a head coach. Okay, fine. He's not going to be asked to do that here. He's going to be in a much more defined role. But he's known as a good recruiter. He was at Nevada for 19 years as an assistant and coached defensive lines, safeties, and linebackers. So bounced around a little bit, got promoted eventually to an assistant head coach role, was under a number of different guys during his tenure there. Then he went to Washington State and spent some time there at Wazoo, and then eventually ended up at Oregon with Andy Avalos before going back to take the head coaching job at Nevada, where things didn't go well and he was relieved of his duties this past year. But, I mean, again, just based on his background and where he's been, I think this is going to be a coach who, if he is active in the recruiting aspect of things, has a good understanding of how to work with some limited resources, how to work with geographical challenges, which you won't have that here because there's so much great talent, around the DFW area and around the state of Texas. But in Washington, and even in Oregon to a certain extent, he dealt with not having just players in his backyard each and every year. And I'm sure Nevada was somewhat similar, that he could just go pick and choose from and put together incredible rosters without traveling very far. So we'll see what his role ends up being, but it seems like a good and savvy hire by the coaching staff and someone who could maybe help make this transitional period faster and better. Someone mentioned yesterday, because I talked about Avalos and his philosophies and aggressiveness, lack of aggressiveness, whatever the case may be, because I know some people are concerned about, okay, well, is this guy, is he really going to be someone who changes things up, who's bringing more pressure, who is doing things differently than the last DC? And one of our listeners mentioned, Matt Clark, he said, we have to have proper expectations here. Sonny's all about offense, and the Frogs will always have a great offense as long as he's around. He's not going to spend a lot of time on defense. So under those conditions, what's the best defense you can put together? Maybe a defense ranked in the 50s, possibly the 40s. Last year's defense was ranked in the 80s and 90s, so it might take a while to get him back into the 50s. Based on Avalos' record at Oregon, he was able to create reasonably reliable defensive rankings in 30s and 40s with a high-powered offense moving the ball when his defense was on the field. It seems like most of his issues at Boise were managing the stresses of being head coach, not really running a good defense. And I think that's correct. I mean, we do have to wonder and kind of think about, okay, for years, Gary Patterson's identity was defensive mastermind, play caller. That's what he hanged his hat on. That's what they were going to do. They're going to be tough, physical, play great defense. And his offenses, now he did have great offenses at times during his tenure, but I think ideally he wanted his offense to play complementary football, take advantage of opportunities, flip field position, kind of manage the game, and not hurt his defense. And so Coach Dykes is more of an offensive mind. Now, I think that's also a reason why going into this next year, Kendall Briles and that offensive coaching staff, it's a make or break year for them, because you can't, Coach Dykes, if you're Sonny Dykes, you can't be bad on offense. That's your whole thing. It's been your thing for years. The offense has to be more consistent. And I know they put together great drives and they had a lot of yardage. It's all about scoring points. In today's football, everybody can move the ball in between the 20s. That's not totally true, but a lot of people can move the ball in between the 20s. What happens when you get in the red zone? If you're not going to be good in the red zone, then how are you making up for that? Are you getting explosive plays? TCU didn't do either of those things particularly well last season. So that has to improve. But defensively, in an ideal world, it would be amazing if your defense was dominant. But more than likely, you're probably going to be looking at a defense that is competent, that's opportunistic, that plays good, fundamentally sound football, and steps up when they're needed, right? And that's what they did in 2022. And so hopefully they can get back to that. And I think Avalos can do that. Now, the question is, can he do it this year? It remains to be seen. There's some roster turnover here. As Matt laid out there, it wasn't a particularly good defense at all last season. So there's definitely improvement that has to happen, and he's going to have to lead the charge when it comes to that. From a recruiting perspective, 247 Sports is reporting that Old Dominion cornerback Lamarian James will be visiting TCU this weekend. He said he's headed there this weekend, according to reports. Last season, 40 tackles, 1 interception, 7 pass breakups, 40 solo tackles, 60 total tackles. Played 3 years at Old Dominion. He's already graduated. He had 1 pick over his career, 87 tackles, and 9 pass breakups for his career there for the Monarchs. He's one of the higher rated and higher graded coverage guys in the portal. And so another corner that hopefully the Frogs can land. They lose Donovan Saunders from Cal Poly. He ends up flipping to A&M later in the process. And so they went and got Travis Broughton from Utah. And now they're also looking at another experienced player in Lamarian James. And I think if they get 2 corners, you probably feel pretty good about that room with who you have coming back, led by Avery Helm and Jenny Canada. Then you have 4 to 5 guys who I believe the coaching staff thinks they can play with and win with, and then you sort of just live with that and hope that these guys can pick up on this new defense quickly. But Lamarian James, corner from Old Dominion, is visiting Ken Wilson from Nevada, who's the head coach there and spent almost 2 decades as an assistant for the Wolfpack. Coached a lot of different positions, but mainly has been a linebacker. So maybe he ends up being the linebackers coach. I think there's a good chance, though, he could just end up being an off-the-field analyst. We'll see what happens. Football Scoop, though, reporting that that's happening, that he's going to be on staff with Sonny Dykes and will be joining new defense coordinator Andy Avalos as they try to clean this defense up and get them to a better place in 2024. I want to start a series today where we look at these position groups. Where are you at from a roster perspective? What has TCU done in the portal? What have they done with the 2024 class? Who are they bringing in at these different positions? What does it look like as we get closer to a new season and closer to putting this roster together for the spring? And we're going to start with the receiver position. We'll do that next year on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. Well, speaking of landing talent and trying to get people that make sense for your company or your team, at the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make to take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that all your success depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and free. LinkedIn's not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. I told you this before. LinkedIn is the name when it comes to people finding work. You're going to be able to cast a wide net and find a lot of talent on their job board. Hiring is easy when you have so many quality candidates. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's not going to waste your time. It's going to make this process so much more efficient. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So as we get closer to spring football, and I mean, TCU is still very active in the portal, but I want to take a closer look at these different positions. Where are we at with these position groups? And I wanted to start today with wide receiver, which you might think that's a weird place to start the conversation, but I want to start on the offensive side of the ball. And we've talked a lot about running back over the past week or so because Amani Bailey clears for the NFL draft. And so suddenly that room is a lot more inexperienced and thinner than expected going into the season. We'll see what they do as far as maybe adding another player. They do have a couple players coming in from the high school ranks this next year. Quarterback is also a position we've talked a lot about because, I mean, there's only so many guys in that room. And they're sticking with Josh Hoover. They also brought in Ken Seals, and then Haas Haney will be joining the fold. But wide receiver, last season was really a revolving door, and there were a lot of injuries that kept guys out of practice, and Sonny Dykes mentioned that multiple times. That was a frustrating thing for the team as far as getting continuity, getting rhythm. And I'm not sure what you guys think. I mean, I guess in today's world, you could say having an alpha or a number 1 wide receiver is an overrated thing. But at the same time, it seemed obvious that there wasn't a go-to guy other than J.P. Richardson in the slot all throughout the year. And I do think it's important to sort of figure that out going into 2024, even if it's not somebody you're just feeding the ball, play after play after play. But here are the additions in the receiver room. From the transfer portal, you have Eric McAllister from Boise State, who was one of TCU's top targets, top priorities. They landed him. McAllister had almost 900 yards receiving last year, found the end zone a lot, was a great vertical threat. Brian Smith, our recruiting coordinator, when he talked to me about the transfer portal class, he was like, this is the guy that's set to make an instant impact. He's got a lot of reps at the G5 level. He was really, really good. He was the focal point of that Boise State offense before he left early and declared that he was entering the transfer portal. So that seems like a good pickup. I think he's going to be somebody that can stretch the field vertically, which was something this team was sorely missing. He also just gives, and we'll talk about Savion Williams a little bit later, but they desperately missed having two quality outside wide receivers last year. It was really Savion on the island by himself a lot of the time, and part of that was injury. And Dalen Wright was effective when he was there, but he was just in and out of the lineup so much. But you need another player on the other side who can help make life easier for Savion. I think Eric's going to do that, and he could end up being the top target on this team. The other player they had in the transfer portal was Braylon James, and in some ways Braylon was a substitute for Cordell Russell, right? You lose a top 100 recruit who didn't see the field really at TCU in his first season and was ready to move on, and you instead add someone who fits that same type of parameter. Big-time high school recruit, goes to Notre Dame, didn't work out. He ends up at TCU, and he's a young player that hopefully they can develop. As far as guys coming in from the high school ranks, Jakyle Baker, the 4-star wide receiver out of Brownborough, highest-rated player in this class from a high school perspective. Really fast, very explosive, East Texas kid. Excited to see what he can do for the Frogs. Duzi Ezukama, who came in from the DFW area, was originally committed to Oklahoma and ends up at TCU. Stoked to see what he can do as a wide receiver for the Frogs. So those are your newcomers, really 4 newcomers. They also brought in some tight ends, but we'll separate tight ends and do that show another day. Drake Dabney is going to be someone, though, that you would imagine will be very active in the receiving game for TCU. Those are the guys you got. And then you have some players that are returning as well. Savion Williams and J.P. Richardson are the two that come to mind that were just consistent last year. And Savion really started to come on as the year went on. It felt like nobody benefited more for whatever reason from that quarterback change than he did. Josh Hoover made a point to try to get him the football. One thing I liked about his season was it seemed like TCU made more of an effort to get him the ball in space, and he's really good at getting yards after the catch. Now, he's not the shiftiest dude in the world, but he just runs hard, and he's big and he's physical, and so he can eat up yardage by just running through somebody or leaning on somebody or breaking a few tackles. So I'd like to see some more screens and outs to him, and then hopefully this is a year. I mean, Max Duggan found a good connection with Savion, giving him chances with 50-50 balls. Everybody thought that was kind of Quentin Johnston's specialty, but, I mean, Q was more of like he would get his stride going. He would just run past people and make explosive plays that way. Savion was a dude that you'd throw the jump ball to, and he would go attack it and high point it and make big plays. I mean, he did have one of those opportunities against Baylor where he made it happen, and a couple opportunities against Texas Tech where Josh just missed him. But with an entire offseason, you hope that's something that comes together in a big way. And then J.P. Richardson, I mean, aside from Monty Bailey, was the most consistent and best player on the offense last year. I mean, he was there. I know he was banged up at times, but he made plays. He moved the chains. He made explosive plays, and he's going to be a huge point of the offense next season. Some other guys that showed a lot of promise, JoJo Earl and Dalen Wright kind of fit this bill. JoJo seemed to also come on as the year went on. Dealt with some drops, some other things that frustrated you. But I still think there's a lot of talent there. And, one good thing about taking flyers on guys like him and Brockermeyer is it wasn't just a one and done type of situation, right? Like there's opportunity to continue to build on and develop based on what you saw in year one. And maybe JoJo can also get more active in special teams this next season. I mean, I know that was something that he did sparingly at Alabama as a punt returner and kick returner. Just didn't seem to have a great feel for, when to make a fair catch, when to return the ball, those kind of things in 2023, and hurt the team at times. And so they eventually just went with JP Richardson as somebody who go, all right, just catch the football and we'll start wherever and we'll try to move from there. But at least we can have possession in decent field position. Dalen Wright, again, I mean, he was effective in that Colorado game. He made some plays against West Virginia in the first half, but was just constantly banged up. And that was something that was an issue at Minnesota. I remember when he left Minnesota, I talked to Kane Robb, and Kane covers the Gophers for the Locked On Network, and he was like, the thing with Dalen is everybody said, like, he has all the tools. It looks like he's the guy that could put it together and be great. It was just about him staying on the field and kind of getting out of his own way. And so maybe this is the year they can put it all together. Jack Besh, another player that dealt with injuries, but was super impressive during his time at LSU. And then you got Major Everhart and Jordan Bailey, who are guys that are really shifty, really fast. I would love to see them get more opportunities in space next year to make plays, maybe on jet sweeps, that type of thing. They have the type of explosiveness you want out of your slot receivers as players who can just go make it happen and, score touchdowns every time they touch the football. Blake Knoll and Chase Jackson just fall in the categories for me as guys that are like, they're here, they're experienced, they've been around, they're going to do what they've been asked to do. And if they pop this year, that's fantastic. But it's hard to think about like what they're projected to be moving forward, just because we haven't seen a ton of production out of them so far. But both those guys are very familiar with the systems. Blake got a lot of snaps last year and got some opportunities. So maybe this is the season where it kind of comes together for them in a big way, and that'd be fantastic if it is. So that's your wide receiver room. Again, I think a lot of talent. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I can kind of talk myself into. Man, I feel like he would be a great player, or there's potential there if they can stay healthy, if things kind of click. But it's just about somebody stepping up and doing the work and getting it done, and that's going to be the huge challenge for wide receivers in 2024. Okay, when we come back, we got TCU hoops tonight. The men play at Shalimar Arena in a big-time game. How important is this ball game? It's really important. We'll talk about it next year on Locked On Horned Frogs. NFL playoffs start this week. It's that time of year again. Cowboys play the Packers. There's more great matchups, and FanDuel is here for you. If you want to dip your toe in the sports betting waters, it's a great time to do it. The regular season's wrapped up, but there's still time to get on the action. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place $5 bet. Just put one $5 bet down, you get $150 in free bets that you can play with. FanDuel is the number one sportsbook in America, official betting partner of the NFL. They also have a safe and easy-to-use app, and it's very easy to navigate. You can do same-game parlays. You can just bet on the money line. You can bet against the spread. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can bet on the NFL. You can bet on the NBA. Just put a $5 bet down, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you're a new customer. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official betting partner of the NFL and proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So TCU basketball trying to avoid going 0-2 in conference play tonight when they take on Oklahoma. Man, Big 12 basketball is a bloodbath. Like, I was watching last night, Iowa State beats Houston at Hilton Coliseum, which now I guess the Frogs are going to get a pissed off Houston team on Saturday when they come to play the Frogs at Shalimar, which will be interesting to watch. Texas survives against Cincinnati. They almost went down 0-2 in Big 12 play. Max Abram had a big shot as a game winner there with 6 seconds left. Everybody's good, and everybody can just jump up and make something happen every night. Grant McCaslin looks like he can get a tough first year from at Tech, but they're rolling. They beat Texas, and they beat Oklahoma State last night. Baylor pulled away from BYU in the second half of that ball game, but that was a close ball game until halftime and even into the first couple media timeouts of the second half. And so TCU takes on Oklahoma tonight. And we know that the first 3 games of conference play are going to be really tough because you got Kansas, which is a game, they had a chance to win, just missed some opportunities down the stretch. And then Oklahoma tonight at home, Houston at home on Saturday. You can't go 0-3. Like, I know it's possible, and they're actually favored tonight because they're at home. But you got to find a way to win one of these games. And I think tonight's your best chance against OU, who's ranked in the top 10 of the nation. They've only lost 1 game in North Carolina. One thing that's interesting about Oklahoma, they're very balanced. Otego Owea is their leading scorer. He averages 15 points a game. But Javion McCullum is right there with him at 14.7 points per game. They got about 8 guys that are scoring 7 or more points a ball game. They shoot 50% from the field, 35% from 3. They get after you on defense. The Frogs were so much better in the half court, though, against Kansas on Saturday. Emmanuel Miller's been fantastic. I think he's going to be the guy that you run your offense through. Jacoby Coles is questionable. He did practice yesterday. If he's 100% healthy and back to his usual exploits where he can score points, I think that'll be a big lift. It feels like Jamie's found something with Jameer Nelson Jr. coming off the bench and Trey Tennyson and Avery Anderson starting. I like that lineup that they start the game with. I like the idea of Nelson being like instant offense guy who can just come off the bench and find a way to score. But when I was doing the tournament preview last year, the NCAA tournament preview last year, I talked with Isaac Shade about, man, how are the Frogs able to get past this? It's been 2 straight years now of losing in the second round. And he was like, well, the biggest thing is you got to find a way to get a better seed. You got to avoid playing teams like Gonzaga and Arizona in round 2. And it's tough to do that in the Big 12 because you got to win a lot of games. And this team, honestly, I think expectations have reset a little bit. I feel like this is a group that you're going to be happy if you just make the tournament. Now that can change. I mean, I had this basketball team buried last year when they lost a road game to Iowa State. They were 2 games under 500 in conference, and they kind of turned things around. But you need to find a way to steal this ball game tonight. It's not going to be easy. Oklahoma's good. They're playing with a lot of confidence. Porter Mosier is doing a good job there. But this is one of those ball games that it's tough, but it's a home game, and you need to find a way to win if you're going to be a serious contender in the Big 12 this year. The TCU women play Texas tonight. Tough ball game, tough matchup. Sedona Print's still out, and Sedona does so much for them, especially defensively. But hopefully Mass and Connor can get more of a shooting rhythm. They've really struggled to shoot the ball lately, and so that's going to be a huge emphasis, getting better shots and better opportunities on offense moving forward for the Frogs. We'll have coverage of those teams tomorrow morning. We'll also continue to talk plenty of football. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team, and we do it here every day. Proud part of the Locked On Network.